So not too long ago I did a video on the top 10 buffs and nerfs that need to happen in Pokemon, and the video did way better than I expected it to. So I was going through the comments and I was looking at suggestions for other buffs and nerfs I should have mentioned in the video. So I decided for this one, let's go and talk about the top 5 buffs that need to happen in Pokemon that I haven't mentioned yet. So the reason why I'm not doing a video on nerfs that need to happen is that the idea behind balance changes is to bring balance in the game. That's generally done through buffs or nerfs of abilities, stats, whatever you need to kind of bring something into the metagame to create balance. Now, how I feel about a nerf or just a series of nerfs, removal of Pokemon, is it does not accomplish balance. That whenever you take out a very powerful threat, it's just going to let a new threat come in, because what is being removed was keeping something down in almost every situation. Pokemon's such a diverse game that if you remove something, there's always going to be something ready to take its place and maybe even shine as even more powerful as some kind of sleeper Pokemon, and eventually do enough nerfs or enough removals of Pokemon, you're just going to be left with a very poor state of a game. But at the same time, we also can't just buff every Pokemon in the game. That some Pokemon, they are designed, they are programmed, they were just meant to not be super competitive. They're just there for appearances or fleshing out the Pokedex and having their own little parts of the lore. So one problem about buffing everything is that those Pokemon could easily lose their sense of identity, and there's also a massive risk of a huge power creep that could make it to where everything is too strong and we lose balance that way. Also with buffing Pokemon, it's really easy just say give it a Mega. Just Megaing every Pokemon, while it is a realistic way to make that Pokemon viable, it's kind of an easy way out, and it is a really boring way of doing things. Also, we only get 1 Mega per battle, so if every Pokemon or a huge amount of Pokemon end up getting Megas, then we'll never see half of them, which kind of defeats the purpose of them. So when coming up for a list of Pokemon that need to be buffed, it's not hard. All you have to do is scroll down through the National Pokedex and you'll easily think, that Pokemon could be stronger, hey, that one could be stronger, that one needs a buff. So this list was kind of challenging in that way. I mostly went off the comments section, and of course this video is not going to cover all the other Pokemon that could use a buff in the game, but I think this covers the right ideas and it just really nails down some Pokemon that need some love. So let's look at number 5, Frostlass. Frostlass used to be a boss in Generation 4, that its powerful Ice Ghost typing was able to keep in check a lot of powerful threats at the time, and it was really cool having a 110 base speed Ice Beam that got Stab, and it just was a more powerful Pokemon at the time. However, this is where that power creep issue comes into play. That 480 base stat total with 80 on that special attack, that's not really much even more. Even the 110 base speed back in the 4th generation was amazing, and now it's hardly average for sweeper Pokemon. So we are running into problems with just these stats right there because everything else has just surpassed it. I mean, 80 for special attack, 80 for an offensive stat that you're relying on is not what sweepers use right now, and Frostlass doesn't have anything else to rely on. I mean, even looking at Gengar, an effective counterpart of Frostlass, has the same amount of speed, but way more special attack, and the durability on Frostlass is really low anyways, and that we can just kind of make those comparisons to where, yeah, while Gengar isn't too tanky, Frostlass isn't much tankier, and it's going to die to effectively the same things. So I already talked about how Megas are lazy, but it's actually very realistic for Frostlass to receive a Mega in future generations, because we can look at Glalie. Mega Glalie exists, Snorunt evolves into Glalie that gets the Mega, and then Snorunt can go into Frostlass that gets the Mega. This is actually very similar to what we see out of Gallade. Gallade ended up getting a Mega evolution in a later generation, and then that just kind of added up because there was a Mega Gardevoir. So Frostlass, it could either use a massive buff to stats, or it could get a Mega, and that's kind of what we're looking at. Next up, we have the Grass type. Just the entirety of the Grass type, because it is way too frail of a typing. I mean, just the base typing of it has 5 weaknesses. Fire and Ice are fairly common. Poison has been gaining a lot of traction because of Fairy typings, so just the introduction of Fairy typings has already nerfed the entirety of Grass typing because it's going to make Poison more popular. Bug, Flying, there's just a lot of really messy things going on right there. Does have a good amount of resistances, but when you look at the breakdown of whatever typing Grass gets paired up with, it's almost a curse. That you're just going to add on to your super effective weaknesses in a lot of situations, and unless you're Grass Steel, you're really going to be screwed over by gaining the Grass typing and not really getting too many benefits out of it, so that is a huge problem. Also, we can see that a lot of Grass dual typings score in the lowest of all dual typings. That the higher score is worse because that means effective gain of like super effective hits versus whatever. So Grass, yeah, it's kind of overwhelmingly bad when compared to other typings and whatnot. The same goes for Ice. Now, there was an effective debate in the comment section about which one needs to be buffed more, or which one needs more love. But the problem is, like with a whole type, you can't really change the weaknesses and resistances too much, especially with Pokemon. This is going to be going into Generation 7, where all these typings have been very established. Sure, we've seen some changes in the first and second generations for typings, but are you going to suddenly make it to where Grass-type Pokemon aren't weak to Ice anymore, even though that's how, like, realistically in the real world it kind of works out? Same with the Ice typing. The Ice typing is meant to be frail, that it's effectively the glass cannon typing, that it's not going to be able to resist much, because Ice is very brittle. So when we're trying to stick to the lore, that's how it works out. Same with the weaknesses, you know, whenever you make contact with Ice, it's going to melt to fire, it's going to get broken if you throw a rock or punch it hard enough, and Steel, it's a more stronger substance against the brittleness of Ice. So when balancing a typing, it's really difficult because you can't change what that typing represents, but you could try to buff more Pokemon in it, or try to do something. In either case, they do need some attention in some place, because the typings themselves are just very poor. Then for number 3, we have Mega Houndoom. Mega Houndoom is the worst Mega in the game, and I don't really think there's much arguing that when we look at Mega Houndoom, it gets the Solar Power ability. Boosts special attack by 50%, but lowers hit points by 1/8 in Sunshine. So, we need a Mega Stone to Mega Evolve, which means we're effectively giving up our item to get something that only has the Life Orb effect in Sunshine. Slightly more powerful. So you lose more health, but you gain 20% more damage, and like it's just easier to run a Life Orb to get those kind of stats because you need the Sunshine. So it adds another layer that just isn't going to work with Mega Houndoom. Another problem is if you're trying to bring Sun, well, there's a Mega Pokemon that you're in contention with. If you bring Charizard Y, well, you can't bring a Mega Houndoom now, even though Charizard Y is one of the best ways of setting up Sunlight. And then we look at Mega Houndoom's stats. The 140 special attack just isn't good, because unless you get all of your solar power going in your favor and stuff, and you're outspeeding your opponent, yeah, it's just a 140 special attack that doesn't get an item. And even then, if you're using Dark Pulse, like a Dark Pulse boosted in solar power for a neutral hit, it's not going to find neutral KOs that often, which is kind of what you need to rely on. 115 base speed could be better, but you know, you'll outspeed a lot, you'll outspeed enough. It's just really hard to use. Then we just compare Mega Houndoom's stats with other Pokemon that aren't Mega. Mega Houndoom gets boosted into 600 base stat total, but there's already pseudo-legendaries that have comparable stats. I mean, all we have to do is go and look at Garchomp and Latios. Latios is going to have 130 special attack, 110 base speed, and it can still have an item while also being a little bit tankier for that special defensive side. And then Garchomp's going to be slower, but it's also going to have a huge amount of attack and really good stab options. So why run a Mega Houndoom when you need to get it set up in Sunlight, when you can just run a Scarf or Life Orb or Banded, other Pokemon that's going to have comparable speed and then just end up outputting more damage? Then you get to run a really just better Mega in the end. So Mega Houndoom, I don't know what you can do with it. You gotta give it a new ability, you gotta tune those stats a bit more, maybe cut down on its defenses, cut down on its attack, just pump more stats on that speed and special attack, and make it a huge glass sweeping threat. That'd be pretty cool to see out of the Houndoom. Getting near the end of this list with number 2, I'm thinking Aerial Ace needs a buff for the sake of flying type Pokemon. When you think about physical flying type Pokemon, we only have pretty much one offensive option, that's Brave Bird. Other than that, Skydrop is situational in doubles for some kind of combos, and Acrobatics does need that setup. Acrobatics can be very powerful if working for it, but mostly if the flying type Pokemon doesn't get Brave Bird and it needs physical hits, it's going to be bust right there, and then you hurt yourself while using it. So your only good stab offensive option is going to deal significant damage back to you. We need to buff something, and I feel Aerial Ace is the best contender. All we have to do is bring it in line with something like Thunderbolt, something like Earthquake. Just elementally push up its base power and give it that usefulness. So 90 base power, boom, done. Tons of Pokemon get access to the Aerial Ace, and now it's going to be viable on not just flying type Pokemon, it's going to be a really good stab option. I feel that it can actually bring some Pokemon into this meta, like Mega Aerodactyl. Mega Aerodactyl will actually benefit from the Tough Claws, have stab, and then have a reliable form of flying type damage. Same with like non-Mega Salamence. Mega Salamence needs that Aerial Ace to have some kind of flying stab, which is kind of sad. That if you want a flying Pokemon to have stab, you have to give it the Aerial Ace ability to justify it, when really buffing Aerial Ace does work as well. Then we also just keep it to where it ignores the evasion stat and can't miss. That's also going to balance out evasion strategies and minimize, while just improving the pool of usable flying type Pokemon and giving us an extra option to use. Do we want to go for that all-in gambit of Brave Bird for the huge damage, or do we dial back on the damage and play it safer on an aerial ace? It will at least give us options, which is a really significant part of balance. And now for the number 1 Pokemon on this list of Pokemon that need buffs, we have Flygon. I don't think there is a single person in the Pokemon community that thinks Flygon is too strong, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows that it deserves a buff. So we look at Flygon's stats. Not that great. 520 base stat total, and just mediocre stats overall that don't really do too much. Why don't we try to buff it into the range? Like, we could just rewrite Flygon as a pseudo-legendary Pokemon. It's a pretty badass dragon, so I'm pretty sure Game Freak could get away with it, or at least buff its stats like 580 base stat total. Give it something to work with that makes it threatening. It needs more attack. It could go for a little bit more speed. 105 base speed lets it outspeed all those other Pokemon, and then pumping stats into the attack will make it strong. Flygon's move pool also doesn't really have too much to offer. I mean, you get your ground, rock, and dragon coverage, effectively making it a worse Garchomp. Give it Dragon Dance, that way you have the option. Do you want to play the setup on Flygon, or do you want to play the reliability of a Garchomp? Because when it comes to Dragon Ground types, Flygon is just screwed from Garchomp's existence. That Garchomp was introduced in a later generation to Flygon, and then Flygon has been effectively forgotten forever. Now when it comes to Mega Evolutions, Flygon is an excellent contender for a Mega Evolution. It is the 3rd stage, so you can't really go any further with Flygon being an evolution, so giving it a Mega, that means you get to push its stats to 620. Maybe even just give it like 10, 20 points in base stats, you know? Buff its attack by 10, buff its speed by 10, then give it a Mega, and now we have a Pokemon that might actually tear stuff up, or just give it Dragon Dance and a nicer buff to the stats, and Flygon's gonna be useful. As for ideas for how to make a Mega Flygon, there is absolutely no shortage because a lot of people want to see the Mega Flygon. Tons of concept art, and it just makes sense to give Flygon some love. So I think that that's going to wrap up the list pretty nicely. It covers a good amount of ideas for Pokemon that need buffs, or at least something that can help balance out all the craziness that we see in the competitive community. So if you guys enjoyed this video, that's top 5 buffs that need to happen for Pokemon. I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.